This is a Fatal 4 podcast.
Eyes forward and prepare to shuffle those feet from side to side. It's time for Squared Circle Strafe, the premier video game podcast of the Fatal 4 podcasting network. I am your host, Pro Wrestling Noah, aka Noah Stewart, and it's time to talk about Silksong. Hello, everyone. Welcome in to the show. Hope you're having a great week. It's as of this recording, we're about 3 days into, and I think as you're listening to this on release day, we're about 4 days into the release of Hollow Knight Silksong. It's finally here. Happy Silksong, everybody. It's finally happened. It's here. Crazy to think that after years of memeing and jokes and spams in chat logs, it is Silksong is here. It's a real video game. People are playing it, and boy, are people playing it. Let me just go ahead and jump into this. I think this first section of the show is just going to be Silksong centric. Silksong came out on Thursday, September 4th, and it has just been like okay, so I logged in to Steam, I think maybe 8 minutes after it had officially launched, because I noticed that it was noon, it's our time in Texas, and thought, well, I just want to log into Steam. I'm at work. I'm not really able to play it or download it right now, but I just want to go to Steam and see that its page is active. I just want to know that it exists. And then I type in steam.com, and I can't, because Steam crashed. And I thought, wow, that's crazy. And then I come to learn later that not only had Steam crashed, but both all of them, PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo storefronts had also crashed. This thing was so monumentally popular that it just brought down all of the storefronts of people just trying to get in as soon as possible to play this game. Which is crazy considering that it's a single player indie game. That this doesn't really happen ever. Like I believe that day when it launched, it broke like all sorts of records, but it broke 500,000 concurrent players on Steam alone, mind you, that let alone all the other storefronts. But on Steam alone, I'm looking at the numbers here. Its all-time peak on Steam DB is 587,150 players at the same time. And it hasn't really slowed down that much. I'm like right now, the current concurrent players is over 400,000. It's number 3 on most played games on Steam right now. The only other 2 games above it are Counter-Strike 2 and Dota 2. Again, this doesn't really happen for single player indie games. Like everything else on this database right now is all like games as service multiplayer games. Like all of these games down to number 13 is like the first game that pops up that is single player by nature. Baldur's Gate 3 is at like 87,000 right now. But everything else, and it's crazy that people, I'm recording this on Sunday, so people are still, it's the afternoon on Sunday. People are off work and, the game just it's the opening weekend for this game, but still that is nuts. And I can only imagine what these sales numbers are for this thing. The game released at $20, which people were like really like, oh my gosh, that's so cheap for a game that's so hyped up. And Silksong was like almost 30 hours of gameplay, just like standard without the DLC even. But people forget the original Hollow Knight was $15. So this is $5 more than that, and this was technically a side game. It's like, because I think it does serve, I think, as a proper sequel in a sense, but this Silksong originally was a backer goal for the original Kickstarter for the original Hollow Knight. They hit, I think, I don't know what number they hit specifically, but it was one of the last stretch goals that they had was that there would be another playable character, Hornet. And as they were trying to, provide that playable character for the game, it expanded so much that they just decided to make it its own standalone game, Silksong. And then, of course, it stays in development for almost 8 years and gets mean to heck on, whatever live stream chat logs and whatnot. And now we're here. And yeah, I find where I'm sitting with it, because I have played the game. I've put about 10 hours in, like 7 hours. I left Steam open for a little bit. Steam says that I've played about 10 hours, but I'd say it's, maybe 7 or 8, give or take. And where I'm sitting with Silksong, I find really interesting for my experience, because I played Hollow Knight when it came out, and I think I spent about 3 hours with it and just kind of like gave up after I got lost for a little bit. And Silksong, I'm finding I'm having a better time with, and I can't put my finger on it specifically. I don't know if, because since I played the original Hollow Knight when it released, I played it earlier this year. I'm pretty sure I talked about it on this podcast. I played and beat the original Hollow Knight just because I felt like I needed to know what the rest of that game looked like before Silksong came out, because I knew Silksong was going to be such a big deal that I was going to have to, play it again just to kind of see. And the original Hollow Knight, I don't love. Like, I don't think it's a bad game, but I've played better Metroidvanias. And I think the thing that frustrates me the most about the original Hollow Knight is the exploration just being so labyrinthian and confusing at points. I think the level design is not amazing for the ways that they want you to kind of get lost in that game. It has fast travel, but there's still points in that game where you have to just truck across big stretches of the map, and it becomes kind of annoying. And Silksong still kind of has that, but I'm not as annoyed by it as I was with the original Hollow Knight. And I think it's because the Team Cherry has, like, it feels like they've really dialed in their level design to where getting around isn't, I don't find, as abrasive as it was before. You get access to a dash ability that not only gives you, like, a quick burst of speed, but also lets you hold down the button and just keep running, which didn't unlock in the original Hollow Knight for a while. So you feel faster, you feel like you have more ownership over the way you move around these big maps, which I looked at where I am currently in the game, and then I looked up, I was just curious, like, Silksong full map into Google, and I was I was a little scared by how much of the map there is still to explore. Again, this game is, I would say, it looks to be about as big as the previous Hollow Knight, which, good on Team Cherry for realizing that they needed time to really build this thing out. But the other thing about Silksong that I think I'm really enjoying as opposed to the previous game is that I like the way that the new main character Hornet for this game, I like the way that she feels moving around and in combat, because in the original Hollow Knight, you just had pretty standard, attack, straight ahead of you, up and down, your little like kind of down strike. And right off the bat, Hornet controls a little bit differently, mostly due to a kind of dive kick ability that you have. Instead of just holding, down and swiping down below you for your, air attack, she does a little dive kick where you kind of go diagonally across and down across the screen. And it can make traversal a little weird at first, especially they introduce these little like platforms that you have to hit with your dive kick in order to propel up into the air, and kind of have some platforming challenges centered around that. You get used to it though, and I feel like just that little bit throws an extra wrinkle into combat. And they also designed the enemies with that in mind, in a really cool way. And also just the level design, I think the level design here is better. I find myself still, like the original Hollow Knight, like kind of wandering around and not knowing exactly where to go. But it's kind of dialed in perfectly where I spend a decent amount of time doing that, but then I'll eventually find where I'm supposed to go, or just like something like, oh, here's a place I haven't been before, I'm going to try exploring this way. And I don't know, I'm just feeling like I am having a better experience with that aspect of the game overall. And it is a game that I continue to find myself thinking about when I'm not playing it, which is a good sign of a good video game. And I am kind of taken aback by how much I am enjoying it. I definitely thought that I would, pick it up for some time and then put it down and start playing some other stuff, and think that like, oh, like, it's $20. I'll just check it out because it's, the big thing everyone's talking about right now, and I just kind of have to know. But I'm pleasantly finding myself enjoying it. So I don't necessarily know if I can recommend it to people who kind of like me played the original Hollow Knight and didn't have such a great time, because it is like really relatively kind of the same game as far as, aesthetic, which is gorgeous, and just like the way that you progress through the game and the combat, and it's like it's relatively the same, but there's enough little differences that it is working for me. So I don't know if I can, I don't know if I can necessarily recommend it solidly to people who didn't have a great time with the previous game, but I would say if you're open to a new experience, then just like maybe check it out. And of course, like, I feel like there are way more fans of Hollow Knight than there are not fans of Hollow Knight. So if you loved the original Hollow Knight, then yes, definitely get this game. It is everything that the original game was, and I would say like more. So yeah, and chances are, if the data is right, you're probably playing Silksong as you are listening to this podcast, as you're listening to me talk about it. So it's the game everyone's playing right now. It will probably pop up on a ton of top 10 lists at the end of the year. It's Silksong, baby. We're here. We made it. Silksong is a video game that is being played by people in 2025. And now people will have to be like, oh, when's Beyond Good and Evil 2 coming out? Anyways, yeah, so that's Silksong. Why don't we take a break? And when we come back, I will tell you about some other video games I've been playing. I played some other video games before Silksong came out, so I'll tell you about what my time spent with those when we come back from this break. All right, we're back. And folks, would you believe it? There are other video games besides Silksong. It was a story during the last podcast we did that a lot of games were kind of getting out of the way of Silksong out of fear of getting those sales gobbled up by Silksong. But some other games came out before Silksong this past week, or like 2 weeks. And one of those games is another action side scroller that I plead everyone to please give some attention. And that game is Shinobi Art of Vengeance, which is, there is, I've said it before, I'll say it again. 2025, Year of the Ninja. There was already a side-scrolling ninja action platformer that came out like a month before this game did. It was like a month and a half. Ninja Gaiden Ragebound, which was also a very good action side-scrolling ninja game. But Shinobi Art of Vengeance is as good, if maybe not better. I still don't know where I'm sitting with it. I've spent about, I want to say, like 3.5 hours with Shinobi Art of Vengeance, and I was expecting to play more of it, but I just ended up playing a lot more Silksong. But Shinobi Art of Vengeance is similarly a game that I continue to find myself thinking about, and I want to play more as soon as I'm done being in the throes of Silksong. But it's similar to Ninja Gaiden in that it's, a side-scrolling action ninja game, but it definitely plays way differently, because with Ragebound, it is very much kind of serving up that classic Ninja Gaiden type of combat where you hit and most enemies die in one hit, and you're just kind of like very quickly slicing your way through the levels. And Shinobi Art of Vengeance is way more combo based, and they give you a ton of different moves in your arsenal to have these kind of like enemy juggling combo driven fights with, and it does the same type of, like you run through a level and there'll be little like arena like setups of enemies. But where Ninja Gaiden is really kind of like has this momentum to it, and you are like slicing through all these enemies in a very proficient way, kind of like propelling through these levels at a good clip. Shinobi is more like sitting in an area and like just like wailing on enemies until they die. And you do that with, they give you access to a bunch of different combos and the Nimpo abilities, which is like a little, ninja magic that gives you a couple different abilities there. And also a kind of Super Saiyan charge, super death move. It's the Ninja Arts, which most of the time end up being like a screen clearing event where you have to like build up your rage meter for. And then also it has like kind of Doom style glory kills where you can attack enemies and raise what's essentially like a Sekiro posture bar. And once that's filled, they have a little symbol above their head, and you just like hold down one of the shoulder buttons and the attack button, and you just kind of zip around to any of the enemies that have that are in that status, and you just insta kill them, and that feels really good. Weirdly similarly to Ninja Gaiden, though, is the levels are fairly lengthy. I actually think some of them might be even lengthier than the Ninja Gaiden levels, because Ninja Gaiden, I feel like you could go like maybe like 15-20 minutes into a single level. And for Shinobi, it feels sometimes like half an hour. Like, these levels are long, but there is a lot of nooks and crannies and stuff to find secrets in. The art is gorgeous. Has this kind of like hand painted aesthetic to everything, and everything that it is doing from aesthetics to the gameplay is really pulling from the whole the whole Shinobi franchise as a whole, which I've played most of the original Shinobi games. I played like all the Genesis ones, Revenge of Shinobi, Shinobi 3, Return of the Ninja Master, Shadow Dancer, and then the Shinobi kind of reboot for PlayStation 2 is one of my favorite games of all time. I don't even think it's that great of a game. I think it's fine, but I think that it's a game I have deep nostalgia for, and I find myself going back to a lot. So I've played a decent amount of the Shinobi franchise, and everything that this game is pulling from and pulls off is really, really fun. You play as, the original Joe Musashi, and it's really funny because there's a lot of dialogue in this game, or just like cutscenes, and they're fully voiced, so you have like a lot of fun voice acting for like demons and other shinobi, and like like government officials and stuff. And then every time they're talking directly to Joe, and every time in the dialogue it feels like there's a moment where Joe should respond, it just cuts over to him, and it's the text is just ellipses, and you just hear a grunt from Joe, and everyone goes, "Ah, yes, exactly, Joe." Like, that part is played up really, really funny. But yeah, just Shinobi Art of Vengeance. If you love side-scrolling action games, definitely check it out, because it is one of the best ones of this year, if not the entire franchise of Shinobi. It has very, very easily is in at least the top 3, I would say. Very, very good video game. And then another game I spent time with that came out around the same time was Sword of the Sea for PlayStation, which is by Giant Squid, who are former devs of the people that brought you Journey for the PS3. And Giant Squid makes a lot of games that are just kind of send-ups of Journey. They did, what was Aquatic? What's the name of that game? It was basically like an underwater version of Journey. And Sword of the Sea is really just kind of more of that. It's still, that kind of same aesthetic. It's, hey, there's a big thing in the distance that you have to kind of make your way towards and navigate this big open area to get to. But this time you play as a warrior with a big sword, but instead of using the big sword as a sword, you use the big sword as a kind of like hover skateboard, as you're kind of, sliding your way through all these levels. And you start off in the desert, and you are slowly bringing like water and ocean life back to this world. And I don't know, I feel like it's hard to recommend if you've had if you've played previous games in these developers' history, if you've played stuff like Journey, and it is so similar to those games where it's like, hey, do you like that? Then you're going to like this. If you played the previous ones and you thought they were fine, but didn't really have to, have another experience like that, maybe not so interested in this. But that being said, I do like experiences like this. I had a good time with Sword of the Sea, and it very much has the kind of like Tony Hawk style, like, skateboarding situation going on, which I am a big fan of in games. I love playing games that have that kind of skateboarding feel to it. And this game does nail it. Just the way that, especially with the PlayStation, haptic feedback of the PlayStation 5 DualSense. You're kind of carving in and out of big dunes of sand, and you feel the granularness as you're kind of carving into it with your sword. And you also have kind of sections where there'll be big half pipes, and there's a trick system. It doesn't show you like what your score is the whole time, except for these little arena areas where it will tell you, hey, get 10,000 points, and you'll get a little bonus unlock of credits to spend for potential upgrades. And having played Tony Hawk, those sections were pretty easy because it was just like, okay, because it doesn't really have a bailout system. You can just mash on the trick button and get your combo as high as possible and just like destroy whatever point threshold there is to get these unlocks. But it's a gorgeous game. A decent amount of different variety of level aesthetics. The story is emotional and interesting and mysterious in the same ways that their previous games were. But yeah, I mean, it's if you have PlayStation Plus Extra, I believe it is available. That's how I played it. Otherwise, it's like $30, which is maybe a little steep for an experience like this. But it's on PlayStation. It's on Steam. If you're looking for kind of indie exploration experience, definitely give Sword of the Sea a shot. And then speaking of skateboarding games, I have continued to play Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4. Which in the previous episode, I said I was kind of disappointed in the short tail that it has, similarly to 1 and 2 remake, in that I've since finished all of the goals in each level. And I was expecting to be like, well, I guess that's it. Time to just kind of like cruise around these levels and, do tricks just as like an excuse to do something with my hands while I'm listening to a podcast. But as it turns out, after I finished the last goals in the last level of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4, and it popped up with a little notification saying, hey, now there's like pro goals to do. And it repopulated all of the levels with these new like expert level goals. That like it's various different like challenges and scores to meet. And they, instead of doing skate, collecting the letters for skate in each level, now you're collecting combo, which I believe started in, it was either 3 or 4, or maybe it was the Underground games. I can't remember, but it instead of collecting skate, you have to collect the letters combo, which you have to hold in a combo for the entirety of you collecting all the letters, which is a fun extra wrinkle of challenge. And honestly, I feel like I remember like getting through the Foundry, the first level of 3, having completed all the challenges, like all the extra challenges, and thinking to myself, is this what Monster Hunter nerds feel like when they get to, like they play the first part of the game and then they get to, the G rank missions and they're like, okay, now the real game begins. Like that's kind of how I feel now playing these extra hard goals for Tony Hawk games, because I have played so much Tony Hawk that like now it feels like these goals are really pushing the challenge that is entertaining to me. Oh yeah, and there's also like the the tournament levels, where you have to score as high as possible, and then you get scored against a bunch of other imaginary skaters. And you do the 3 heats, and usually for those you just like score as high as possible, and then you'll get a gold medal if you come in first place. But now they have a platinum medal where not only do you have to score first in the tournament, but you also have to clear a specific gap while placing first in all the heats. So, for example, there is the Brazil tournament in 3, and there is a gap you have to clear that's just like a jump from one quarter pipe to the other, but you also have to do Christ Air to emulate the the giant Jesus statue in Brazil. And I don't know, I really really like that extra layer of challenge, especially when it's so thematic like that. I really really enjoy that. So I still haven't finished all the ones in Tony Hawk 3 yet, so I'm definitely looking forward to playing more of that as an excuse to listen to some podcasts and just chill out with some Tony Hawk. So glad that I still have fun reasons to play that game. But that is all the other games I've been playing. So why don't we take a break, and when we come back, I'll hit you with some of the news that happened this past week. See you in a bit. All right, folks, we're back, and let's get into some of the news that happened this past week. A decent amount of news. Starting off with a story that's kind of a bummer, but VideoGameChronicle.com reports that a Saudi firm acquires co-ownership of the Evo fighting game tournaments, that being the Evolution Championship Series, which is the kind of the grandest stage of fighting game tournaments. I'm sure most people who play video games would at some point have turned on Twitch while the tournament is happening and going, oh geez, what's this this thing with like the most view numbers at this time. And it's I've been watching Evo for I would say a long time, for like over a decade. I remember pulling up tournament like VODs in the library at college, watching Daigo in the finals of Street Fighter 4. I have fairly warm memories of Evo, and getting hype at big fighting game moments. And Evo traditionally has been at least its roots are in very grassroots, fan driven ways of operation. And over the years it had gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Had a little bit of controversy around the time of the pandemic, but came back, and I believe Sony had a stake in it for a decent amount of time. And now Saudi has, I believe, since Sony kind of relinquished their shares of the tournament, a new Saudi backed firm has come in and taken co-ownership of it, which, judging by some of the fan reactions I've seen, has not been met that positively from the fighting game community, because with huge Saudi money coming in, they will want to kind of run it the way that they want to, instead of the way the fans want to. And I think you've seen a decent amount of evidence of that with the way that the King of Fighters, Mark of the Wolves, City of the Wolves game, when that came out, and like whatever DJ was added to the game because he's like the personal DJ of like the Prince of Arabia or whatever, Prince of Saudi Arabia, sorry. And just all sorts of, the soccer guy was in that game, and the way that they operated, tournaments around that game. It's all just, it's a little icky, let's say. So hopefully, I think there has been some talk, I think I've seen from the fighting game community of not necessarily starting over, but like, kind of supporting smaller tournaments in lieu of Evo kind of becoming a weird thing now, which I guess we'll see kind of the full effects of sometime next summer, when Evo comes back around. But I don't know, that's kind of a wait and see thing at the moment. Kind of a bummer, but the fighting game community will find a way. And in other news, kind of similarly monolithic, let's say, Call of Duty movie has officially in the works at Paramount, and the TV show possibly to follow. Activision has officially signed a deal with Paramount to produce a Call of Duty movie, which is fascinating in that Call of Duty as a game, as far as like all of the other, military shooters, Call of Duty has traditionally been the most cinematic of those games. The original Call of Duty kind of really playing on, kind of like Saving Private Ryan aesthetics. And the idea of a movie based on a game that it was hugely inspired by movies is kind of weird. But I feel like having a movie poster with the words Call of Duty on it will drive an audience. I feel like that, that Call of Duty is one of those franchises that if you go and ask, anyone out on the street, hey, what game do you think of when you think video games? A lot of people will say Call of Duty, especially in the current kind of landscape of video games. I feel like you'd hear Fortnite, or, depending on the age group you're asking, something like Roblox. But Call of Duty is still like, that is a game that, like, a lot of people, that's like the game they play. Like, and similarly in the way that I think now and really used to be like Madden or NBA 2K. Like, there are people that wouldn't necessarily qualify themselves as gamers, but they still like, this is the video game that they play. So having that big of a kind of already established fan base, I could see potentially there, a lot of people already being seeded for a Call of Duty movie. What the heck would a Call of Duty movie be? I think that still is, remains to be seen. But they're doing it, and also a TV show, which, Paramount needs more of those, I guess, for their service. They already tried with Halo, and that didn't go so great. So I guess we'll see. Like, what is it like? Is it like Jack Reacher at that point for TV? I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Then Sony is reportedly planning a Nintendo Switch style PlayStation 6 portable. This news coming from a acclaimed leaker on YouTube, Moore's Law is Dead, that Sony is reportedly making a, kind of Nintendo Switch style docking capable console. I don't think this doesn't necessarily mean that their next console will be like a Switch, where, I think there still will be a proper PlayStation 6 boxed console that you put in your entertainment center. But I think they're kind of doing not unsimilar to what Xbox is doing with the ROG Ally, of their, being a like Xbox release of that console. I think they want to have a Sony handheld console with docking capability that is able to play PlayStation games. But I think that there's already been speculation about the power, like, the chipset that is going to be in this thing, and it is not as powerful as what is being speculated about the PlayStation 6. And I find that that's kind of like where Sony and Microsoft kind of find themselves as being, they would have to deliver this weird in between, because the advantage that Nintendo has is that it's kind of already expected of them to be less powerful consoles, but that's the way you play Nintendo's games. So it doesn't really have to be, they don't really have to keep up with the Joneses in that way. So they can have a console that is their main console that does both. Whereas with PlayStation and Xbox, they have these, really powerful consoles, but they aren't really able to make them portable in the same way at the same time. So you can have these less powerful handheld, like kind of side things along with what you can play on the consoles, but they might not necessarily run as well. So like potentially it could be something like playing Elden Ring on a Steam Deck, where sure, you could play it on a PC with a higher frame rate and better looking textures, but you can play it on a Steam Deck and it's playable. You might have like some, slowdown during like, particle graphics heavy parts of a boss fight, but it's still playable. And I think that's really where PlayStation is going to find themselves with whatever this like docking capable handheld is going to be. Not necessarily a PlayStation 6 or like a PSP alongside the PlayStation 6, but kind of something in between. And what I think would be wise of them would be to kind of purport this thing as something to play their legacy collection on, like put out, like just re-release a bunch of like PlayStation 1 and 2 and 3 games and say, here's a great way to play it and it's portable. That I think would be a really smart move of them. That is not historically something that Sony appears to be interested in. They haven't really done an amazing job with making their past catalog of games really super accessible. But I guess, we'll see when we get some more solid details on whatever that thing ends up being. Speaking of legacy games, Atari, the kind of newly invigorated Atari, has acquired 5 Ubisoft games, including Child of Eden, Grow Home, and will re-release and quote evolve them. And yeah, so the list of games here that Atari has purchased from Ubisoft is Cold Fear, which is a old PS2 game that was essentially Resident Evil 4 on a boat. Like it had the kind of the same over the shoulder aiming style of gameplay, but it was on like a spooky boat. And Child of Eden, which is a game that was made by the guy who did Rez, kind of a similar synesthesia action shooter. The game I Am Alive, which was a download only PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 game, which I remember when The Last of Us came out. I remember thinking to myself, "Oh, it's that game that's kind of like I Am Alive." Like it was a kind of post-apocalyptic survival game that had a similar kind of idea of you're having low resources and being thrown into interactions where, okay, can I maybe talk myself or run away from this situation? Or do I use one of, the very few bullets that the game gives me to kind of shoot my way out of this altercation? So that's an interesting one to grab. That's a game that I haven't thought about in a long time. And then they also bought the 2 games in the Grow Home franchise, Grow Home and Grow Up, which is the game where you play as the little robot bud and climb your way up through a increasingly vertical world of vegetation to get to the top of the game. And I like those games a lot. So I'm looking forward to having, kind of updated versions of those games. It's neat that this version of Atari is really kind of putting their best foot forward with preservation with these games that, a big company like Ubisoft, I guess, didn't really see a future in investing in. So Atari is just gonna, swipe them up and do it for them, which is really neat. And also kind of coming out of the story was another one that the Atari CEO shared 3 Dream remasters that they would like to do in an interview that they did with Video Games Chronicle. And their CEO Wade Rosen told them that if given the opportunity, like the 3 games that would like be their dream to get a hold of and do some kind of remaster for would be Panzer Dragoon Saga, which is really interesting because that is a game that is highly sought after on the Sega Saturn and is like legendarily one of the most expensive games that you can get in the the resale marketplace. But it's still extremely niche. Like Panzer Dragoon, I feel like is not a huge franchise, and Panzer Dragoon Saga especially is a like RPGification of the Panzer Dragoon games. Ogre Battle, which is again this little like niche strategy game, and then Snatcher, which if you're a fan of Hideo Kojima's games, Snatcher might mean something to you, but it was essentially Hideo Kojima's game that he made before Metal Gear Solid. It was a Sega CD game. It was kind of a point and click adventure in a like wish.com, not wish, that's offensive to Snatcher, but it was a very like, oh, Hideo Kojima watched Blade Runner, so he made a video game version of Blade Runner, but it's a very cinematic looking adventure game with a kickin' soundtrack. Just look up the soundtrack for Snatcher on YouTube. Have a good time. But I think it's really neat that Atari for the longest time was owned by people who had no idea what to do with it. Like open a hotel or whatever, slap some logos on it, try to really like get paid on just the nostalgic aspect of Atari and not really doing anything in video games. And now it's owned by someone who appears to really care about video games and wants to, do something to kind of make these older games accessible to people. So I'm really looking forward to the future of what this new version of Atari has in store. And speaking of things that are in store, and old publishers, actually, iconic game publisher Acclaim marks its return with a showcase next month. Next month, I believe, being this month, September. Actually, yeah, here it says a showcase will take place on September 10th. So just this coming week here at 2:30 Eastern. They will be having a showcase for, I guess, what they have in store for the future of Acclaim, which will be interesting because Acclaim historically was a publisher that did a lot of licensed stuff, and it really, I don't think there's a lot of knowledge around right now what Acclaim really owns as far as IP goes. So we could really be expecting anything from this. Maybe there will be a professional wrestling game because Jeff Jarrett is on the board for Acclaim, which is still something that I find really entertaining and silly. But yeah, I'll be really interested to see what Acclaim has brewing up in that showcase coming up this week. And then also mid-September, this last story here, there will be a Nintendo Direct, reportedly on September 12th, which I don't think is a solid date yet. The nature of Nintendo, they like to announce these things like maybe 36 hours in advance, but post a little, hey, notify me when the stream goes live on YouTube thing. But I think the thing that we know for sure will probably be there is a release date announcement for Metroid Prime 4, which if they don't do it now, then when the heck will they do it? Because it is supposed to release this year, and we're in the fall now, so it's gotta be now. And there'll definitely, probably be that. And then I don't know. I think if it's not just a Metroid Prime 4 Direct, then maybe we'll see potentially what will be their next big game. Whether it be I don't know. It feels like it's too soon for a Mario, maybe. But it could be something like that, because we have Bonanza this year. We got, Zelda fairly recently. That was like, 2 years ago was Tears of the Kingdom. And I feel like it could be time for Animal Crossing, perhaps. Because the last Animal Crossing came out 5 years ago. And New Horizons was like one of the big, like that thing alone, I think added an extra like year or two to the Switch's life cycle. So I don't know. We might see something big, because we really haven't had any Nintendo Directs like of that level this year. So yeah, definitely looking forward to whatever it is supposed to be a meaty one. It's supposed to be a 45-minute Direct. Or wait, no, I'm wrong. I'm looking at this article wrong. The 45 minutes was what they spent on Kirby Air Riders, which I am also. There'll probably be a little bit of Kirby Air Riders in this Direct as well. So yeah, hopefully, maybe some new GameCube games being added to the Nintendo Online collection. That'd be sick. I'm looking forward to this. Looking forward to this Direct coming on September 12th, reportedly. And that is the news of the week. And I think that is it for this episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening to another episode of Squared Circle Strafe. Leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts if you like the show. If you follow me on you can follow me on Blue Sky at Uzi Neon. If you want to catch more of me talking about some real nerdy stuff, you can follow the Didn't Get All of It podcast to hear me and the rest of the Fatal 4 hosts talk about the latest and greatest in professional wrestling. You can also sign up for our Patreon to get exclusive access to our Discord, as well as bonus content and the satisfaction of supporting independent podcasting media. Head to patreon.com/fatal4pod. That's fatal, FOUR pod. Thank you again for listening, and as always, enjoy Silksong.
You've been listening to a Fatal 4 podcast. Subscribe today wherever you get your podcasts, and visit fatal4pod.com for more episodes, merchandise, and info on the Patreon.